So with that, I would like to introduce our first team. It is Kim Blackburn, Vishali, Rajan, and Tyler Craig in project management and business analysis. Kim is somebody who is, when I first came to UF, or came to UF Advancement, was a guide and kind of a co-boss to me. I had another desk over there in PMRA, and it was built a great relationship early on. She's very helpful. Beyond being having documentation superpowers by day, Kim is a great singer-songwriter by night. She's claimed to have been perhaps the most rained out gigs during COVID. Is that right? Vishali and Tyler have had the pleasure to work with on developing our LMS, our Gator Institute online training and development. It's been a great partnership working with them. Vishali is also a singer and a music theory hobbyist. And Tyler, noticed that he probably has the world record for the most attended weddings that I know of. And he attended his first Gator game before he was even born. So let's please welcome the PMBA team on documentation. It's not as painful as it sounds.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Have you ever made a $193 million mistake at work? At NASA, you'd be safe in assuming there's a lot of highly intelligent people. They're rocket scientists. It doesn't mean that they're immune to the mistakes brought about by the lack of properly documented processes. In 1999, NASA built the Mars Climate Orbiter. It was built to withstand a minimum proximity to the surface of Mars of 80 kilometers. However, at launch, it was set on a trajectory that would bring it within 56 kilometers of the surface, and it disintegrated. The cause? Unit conversion. Apparently, through all of NASA's research, development, and preparation, they failed to ensure a consistent documentation of their unit of measure, either the imperial or the metric system. And this led to this disastrous miscalculation. Documentation is a critical component of managing complex information at complex organizations. And it's a passion of mine. I confess, I've always loved writing. It's just something, I didn't plan to do it. It's just something I've always done. So I've been a lifelong documenter. On October 2nd, 1988, I received my first journal. And I know this date with such precision because it's literally documented on the inside cover. I could never have guessed when I wrote that first journal entry that I would get the honor of leading a team dedicated to documentation as an organizational asset. But today I do. The project management and business analysis team exists in large part due to the need to document those processes that keep our operations on track and moving forward. But we all know that documentation is important. It's critical, so helpful in so many ways. Why is it often the last thing we do or we fail to do? So, documentation sounds painful. Let's be honest. It's daunting, it's overwhelming, it's a luxury and a necessity we often do not have time for. We are truly busy people. We think of outdated procedures that are painstaking to write down, policies we may never refer to. But what if instead we thought of documentation as everyday information gathering that feeds a shared knowledge base that serves the greater good of our organization now and in the future? Every day of our work lives, we're gathering information through conversations with colleagues, through meetings, chats, emails. All of that has the potential to become documentation. Simply asking yourself, who else could benefit from this information other than me or the people in this room? And where's the best place to capture and or share it gets you down the path to becoming an information gatherer and documenter. It doesn't actually have to be perfect, and having some information can be better than none, right? So we invite you today to become information gatherers and documenters with us. My colleague Vishali Rajan is going to come and talk to you a little bit about how throughout history, gathering information and documentation has helped communities thrive, and her experience in becoming a documenter here at Youth Advancement.
Thank you, Kim. Let's first take a look at where in history the need for documentation arose. Initially, we were all hunters and gatherers. We looked for food, we made shelters, we protected our youngs, and we fended for ourselves. Today, we still do all of that in different forms, but the same thing happens because the basic survival instincts have been given from generation to generation through our DNAs. So why document? Well, as communities expanded and got more and more complex, we started learning things that could not be replicated by our DNA. Things like laws, customs, mannerisms. On a financial side, we had to keep track of accounts, transactions, inventories. We started learning things that could not be held by one human brain in the course of the lifetime. So what did we do? Well, we got this huge amount of data together and we organized it. We created a database. We made sure that people had access to the database, because if we did not do all this, the social order would have collapsed. Same goes for our advanced database. That our advanced database holds such a huge amount of data, and if it didn't exist, our advancement department would not exist. 2 years ago, I came to the advancement department with a background in education. I had no insight or no knowledge or experience working in advance. I was overwhelmed and totally lost. There was a whiteboard above my desk, and I started jotting down things that I heard, anything from acronyms to terminology, processes, names, just anything. I also started asking questions at meetings, team members, so forth. And I jotted down those answers as well. It came to the point where my screen started looking like that. Actually, even a messier form of that. What I also started doing was I started erasing everything when I did not need the visual cues anymore. But what if instead of erasing everything, I had organized it somehow and put it on the shared drive for all of advancement to see and pull out when they need it? This is what my team is trying to do. Our team is trying to download the information from the corners of our brains, organize it, and store it and share it with everyone in the department. We are trying to bridge the gap between the person who knows to the person who doesn't know. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Tyler Craig, who will talk to you about some documentation strategies.
Thanks, Vishali. So what happens if you have no good documentation, or perhaps none at all? Well, you might find yourself in one or more of the following scenarios. So first, does your department have a person who knows all the things, or perhaps you even are that person? While that person might be a valuable asset to your department, they're also a major risk for our organization as a whole. It's important that even though they're some of our busiest people, that we start to gather that information from them and get it out of their heads and into a usable form. What happens if that person is unavailable, or they leave the department, or something terrible happens? It's possible that you'll lose that information in those processes when those people leave. Or how about this scenario? You have a meeting and everyone takes away their own understanding of what occurred. A few weeks go by and all that remains are those false memories that each person may have created in their own mind. Our minds are extremely susceptible to new information coming in and new experiences, and they'll solidify those false memories in our minds. Interestingly, those false memories are the #1 cause of false conviction. Or finally, think about the last time you brought someone on board to your department. How much of what that new person was expected to learn was formally documented? Or was most of what they were expected to learn coming informally or through some form of osmosis? While that could be fine, it also can lead to those same mistakes and process inefficiencies being passed down from person to person because our new hires are too new to understand that. So what can you do immediately to start becoming a better documenter? Well, the first thing you can do is start taking notes. You can start assigning someone to take notes in every single meeting that you have. Our team likes to use OneNote because it's very easy to collaborate. It integrates directly with Microsoft Teams, and we can have a shared knowledge base from the very beginning. It's also important that after you assign that person goes back afterwards and checks in, make sure that no discrepancies are included in those notes so that those false memories aren't created. For me, this has always been the most difficult thing for me to do. Back in school, I used to get in a lot of trouble because I didn't take good notes. I didn't show my work. And I didn't understand why it was necessary. To me, it all made sense. It was all in my head, and I could remember it. But what I didn't realize at the time was it wasn't for me. It was for everyone else. It was for the people who came after me to understand how I came to my conclusions and to understand the knowledge that I was going to pass on. Another thing that you can do right away, and it's very easy in our new virtual environment, is start recording your meeting. Using Zoom, just click on the button and you'll have that record in case someone wasn't able to attend the meeting or you need to go back and double check. Nothing is going to be more accurate than that recording. And finally, what you can do all the time is remember to ask clarifying questions. It can happen in the meeting, but it can also happen after. If you look back and see those notes, feel free to use something like Microsoft Teams to continue the discussion afterwards and make sure that you're probably not the only person who's going to have a question about that complex topic. And so if you've handled all those basic things and you're on the way to being a good documenter, what can you do to set your department up for success in the future? Well, you can take on a more advanced initiative like the documentation overhaul project. And the way you can do that is by following these 2 steps. First, create an inventory of all the processes in your department that can be considered repeatable. Then categorize those by their importance and by the level of risk if it were to be done incorrectly. Then use those 2 metrics and sort them. Determine which one is your most important process. Then, using someone who doesn't normally do that process or even a third party, begin documenting it. Remember that no step is too small. Include as much information as possible and define any acronyms or unclear terms. Then you want to go back and start looking for opportunities for improvement for OFI. These are things like asking questions, why are we doing this step? Is this step able to be automated? Is there a better way to do this? And you'll begin streamlining that process to make it easier and clearer for everyone else. Then make sure you take a few days away from the process, then come back to it. And it's time to review it. Now it's time to refine and find that it's going to be easy for someone who has never seen it to come in and do that process and understand it. Then just repeat with the remaining processes that you have. So while your missed contact report or your undocumented process might not cost us $193 million, it can lead to those same process inefficiencies and mistakes that can be avoided. So it might seem daunting, it might seem time consuming, but if you start now, you can become a good documenter. And if it feels overwhelming, feel free to reach out to the MBA team